My coworker didn't stab me in the back in some dramatic way. He just laughed, repeated one sentence, and made sure the whole room was laughing at me, too. Boss says you never contribute, Mark announced, spinning his pen between his fingers like a microphone. But hey, at least you're consistent, right? The conference room went quiet for half a second, just long enough for the words to land, and then the laughter rolled in. Short, awkward, relieved. People glanced at me the way you look at someone who just dropped their lunch in the cafeteria. Sorry, but not sorry enough to help. I sat there with my notebook open, bullet points neatly written, the numbers we were presenting already double-checked by me the night before. My throat felt dry, but my face stayed neutral. If you've spent enough years being the reliable one, you learn how to freeze your expression when someone turns you into the punchline. Across the table, our manager, Claire, didn't laugh. She didn't defend me, either. She just stopped scrolling on her laptop and looked up, eyes moving from Mark to me, like she was filing something away. "Can we get back to the forecast?" she asked. "We're already over time." The screen at the end of the room showed Mark's slide deck. My spreadsheet, his formatting, his voice, my work. It had been like that for months, maybe years, and I'd let it slide because I thought everyone knew how it really worked. The quiet guy crunches the numbers, the loud guy sells them. That's how I rationalized it. But that sentence, "Boss says you never contribute," hit differently. It wasn't just a joke. It was a rewrite of the story in front of everyone. I forced my hand to stay steady as I clicked my pen and cleared my throat. "Slide 12, I said, keeping my voice calm. "The variance analysis is off by about 3%. The client's CapEx last quarter was higher. I updated the file this morning." Mark's jaw flexed. He flicked slide 12. Claire's eyes moved to the screen. "Did you use the updated numbers, Mark?" she asked. Yeah, of course," he said too fast. "Must have been a sync issue." "It was in the shared folder at 8:15, I added. "File name Q3 Forecast Gant's Final Grant. I tagged you." A tiny shift in the room. Not much, but I felt it. The laughter had faded. Now there was just the hum of the HVAC and the soft click of Claire's trackpad. "All right," she said after a beat. "Grant, send the updated file to the client deck channel after this. Mark, re-export the slides with the correct numbers and send them to me by end of day." She moved on. Sales pipeline, action items, the usual corporate oxygen, but my brain stayed stuck on the way people had laughed, on the way Mark had looked at me while he said it, like he was daring me to say something, to make a scene. I didn't. I sat there, took my notes, nodded when action items were assigned. When the meeting ended, chairs scraped back and people filed out in pairs, still chatting about lunch spots and weekend plans. "Hey man, you know he's just joking," James from IT muttered as he passed me, not quite meeting my eyes. "That's just how Mark is." Yeah, I knew exactly how Mark was. He was the guy who always sat closest to Claire in meetings, the guy who sent quick recaps to the team 15 minutes after a call ended, with bullet points that made it sound like he'd led everything. The guy who would stand by my desk at 6 p.m., lean on the partition and say, "Can you just take a quick look at this model? You're faster with the formulas." Then present it the next morning like it had appeared fully formed in his inbox. I used to tell myself I didn't care. My paycheck cleared. My projects shipped. My performance reviews were fine. I wasn't trying to be a star. I just wanted to do solid work and go home not feeling like I'd sold my soul for a free sandwich. But when someone tells a room full of people that your own boss thinks you don't contribute, it stops being harmless. It plants something. Doubt. A story that spreads when you're not in the room. After the meeting, I closed my notebook slowly, letting the others rush out. Claire stood at the front of the room, unplugging her laptop. Mark hovered nearby, still talking about nailing the narrative for the client presentation next week. "Grant, do you have a second?" Claire asked. My stomach dipped. "Sure." Mark stepped aside, smiling like he'd just finished a great performance. "I'll let you two strategize," he said, clapping me on the shoulder a little too hard as he walked out. The door closed behind him. The conference room felt bigger without the noise. Claire rested her laptop on the table and leaned her hands on either side of it. "Is there a problem between you and Mark I should know about?" she asked. Her tone was flat, not accusing, not friendly. I thought about saying no. I could already hear the script forming in my head. "We're fine. It's just jokes. We work well together." That was the easy answer, the one that kept Monday mornings simple. Instead, I heard myself say, "There's a problem, yeah. It's not new." Her eyebrows lifted a millimeter. "Go on." I didn't unload. I didn't rant. I picked one example, the cleanest one I had. "Last month's pricing model for the Northbridge proposal," I said. "I built it. He presented it. In the email to the VP, my name never appeared. Same pattern with the Q2 variance report. And now we're at a point where he's comfortable about telling the room that you think I don't contribute." Claire's gaze sharpened. "I never said that," she replied quietly. "I know," I said. "That's why it bothers me." For a moment, she just looked at me, and I realized how rare it was that we spoke without Mark in the room, filling silence with his little jokes, and don't worry, I've got it. "Send me an email with the specifics," she said finally. "The examples, links, dates, just the facts, no adjectives." That caught me off guard. "Okay." She straightened up, picked up her laptop. "I can't fix what I don't see, Grant, and I don't like being quoted for things I didn't say." When I walked back to my desk, Mark was already leaning against the partition, spinning his pen again. "Dude," he grinned, "you looked like you were about to pass out in there. Relax. They know I was kidding." I slid into my chair, woke up my screen, and opened Outlook. "Sure," I said. "I'll send Claire the updated file." "Good man," he said, and slapped the partition twice before heading off toward the kitchen to charm whoever was refilling coffee. I watched him walk away, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I could have let it slide again. Tell myself I'm above office politics, that I'm not going to be that guy who complains. Instead, I opened a new email, addressed it to Claire, and typed, "As you requested, here are a few concrete examples of the credit and communication issues I mentioned." I attached links, timestamps, the threads where my work quietly turned into Mark's latest update. No commentary, no sarcasm, just a paper trail I should have started keeping a long time ago. When I hit send, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like moving a piece on a chessboard I'd been pretending not to see. I didn't know it yet, but that tiny decision, to stop laughing it off and start writing things down, was the first crack in the story Mark had been telling about me for years. I didn't expect anything to change overnight. People like Mark don't collapse from one quiet email. They lean on the same tricks they always have: confidence, noise, and the assumption that no one will challenge them. The next morning, he walked in with a cup from the expensive cafe downstairs, humming like he owned the air around him. "Big day," he said, dropping his bag onto his chair. "Claire wants us aligned for the client dry run. You good with taking another pass at the numbers?" There it was, the old rhythm. He asked casually. I pick up the work, he presents it as his. Simple, efficient, parasitic. But something in me had shifted. Not anger, clarity. "I'll handle my part," I said without looking up. "You handle yours." He paused. Just a beat. Not long enough for anyone else to notice, but long enough for me to register it. Then he chuckled. "We're a team, man. Don't get weird." I didn't answer. I opened the task board instead. Overnight, I'd reorganized the entire project into clearly assigned, time-stamped tasks. No overlap, no ambiguity. Every card had a name on it, his or mine. When he refreshed the board on his monitor, I saw his posture stiffen. He didn't say anything, but the discomfort rolled off him in quiet waves. He had lost the fog, the gray zone where he operated best. Around noon, Claire called for a sync in the smaller conference room. Just me and Mark. She was direct, as always. "I looked over the examples you sent, Grant. I also cross-checked the threads and edit history." Mark leaned back, arms crossed, smile practiced. There's been some miscommunication, nothing major. Claire didn't return the smile. This isn't miscommunication, this is misattribution. A small word, but it detonated the air between us. She continued, going forward, I want all project work visible. Shared documents only. No private files. I want clear ownership on every deliverable. If either of you changes something, I want the tracked history left intact. For a second, Mark looked like he might push back, but he didn't. He couldn't, not with the evidence sitting in her inbox. Of course, he said, clearing his throat. Transparency is great. But that was just the beginning. The rest of the day unfolded like someone had changed the lighting in the office. People looked at me differently, not admiring, not sympathetic, just reconsidering, as if they were realizing I wasn't the character Mark had been narrating all this time. Still, the imbalance wasn't gone, not even close. At 3, an email chain started about the upcoming investor prep, a high-visibility moment for our unit. Mark replied, all within 60 seconds, positioning himself as the coordinator, attaching a rough outline, assigning himself as presenter, and then he added a line that made my jaw clench. I'll need Grant to finalize the technical section since he has more bandwidth this week. Bandwidth. The corporate synonym for he'll do it quietly. Before I could respond, Claire beat me to it. Let's clarify ownership, she wrote. Grant has already been handling the full modeling workflow. Mark, you'll be responsible for narrative framing and stakeholder communication. Let's respect those divisions. A clean correction, precise, public. Mark didn't reply for 8 minutes, an eternity for someone who normally responded like he had a buzzer in his pocket. When he finally did, it was a clipped, understood. But I didn't miss the way he avoided eye contact for the rest of the afternoon. And I especially didn't miss the moment I overheard him in the hallway, whispering to someone from sales. Claire's overreacting. You know how sensitive some people get when they're under pressure? Some people. Sensitive. He was rewriting the story again, just shifting the tone. I didn't interrupt. I didn't confront him. Instead, I kept doing what I'd started. Documenting. Tasks, messages, meeting summaries. Everything objective. Everything verifiable. Not because I was scared. Because I finally understood the game he'd been playing all along. He wasn't trying to outperform me. He was trying to define me. And once someone controls the narrative, they don't need the truth. That night, I stayed late. Not to redo Mark's work. I wasn't saving him anymore. But to make sure my part of the investor deck was airtight. Every formula polished. Every assumption sourced. Every footnote defensible. At 7:42, Claire walked past my desk, coat over her arm. You good? Just finishing the model. She nodded. Don't carry all of this more than you have to. I'm not, I said, and it was true. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't being crushed by the weight of someone else's shortcuts. I was just moving correctly. Good, she said, because Friday's dry run is going to matter. I knew what she meant. Friday wouldn't just be a rehearsal. It would be the moment the investors saw how we operated as a team. And if Mark tried anything, even slightly, the receipts were ready. As I packed up my things, the office finally quiet, I realized something I should have admitted long ago. I had spent years trying to keep the peace in a war I didn't start. But tonight, I stopped being the hero. Because heroes clean up messes. Professionals just stop making them for other people. I turned off my monitor, grabbed my bag, and headed for the elevator, knowing one thing with absolute certainty. Mark wasn't done, and neither was I. By Friday morning, the whole office felt tighter, like the air had a grain to it. The investor dry run wasn't just another meeting. It was the closest thing our team had to a spotlight, the kind that could push someone up or expose cracks no one wanted to admit were there. Mark arrived early for once, shirt pressed, hair gelled, wireless clicker already in his hand. He paced the conference room like a performer rehearsing lines. I watched him from my desk, unseen behind the half wall as he practiced transitions and counted imaginary beats under his breath. He wasn't preparing the content. He was preparing the show. At 9:58, Claire called me in. When I stepped through the glass doors, Mark flashed a rehearsed smile. "There he is," he said loudly. "Our numbers guy. Hope you brought the magic today." It wasn't a compliment. It was positioning. A way of telling the room, and the investors later, that I was the background technician and he was the face, the storyteller, the leader. Claire shut the door behind us. "Let's keep this focused. Investors are joining on Monday, not Friday, so today we test clarity, timing, accuracy, nothing flashy." That last line was for him. He either didn't hear it or pretended not to. We started. His first slides, market overview, competitive landscape, historical performance, were fine. Not brilliant, but clean enough to pass. Then came the transition to the modeling section, where our work split clearly between his narrative and my numbers. He clicked to the forecast slide and said, "Now, full disclosure, this is where we ran into some delays. Grant wasn't able to finish all of the sensitivity scenarios yet, so..." My head snapped up before I could stop myself. Delays? Scenarios unfinished? Every scenario had been completed, triple-checked, documented with sources, and uploaded publicly to the shared folder, the one he'd been required to use. Claire looked at me. Not long, not sharply, just enough. "Grant," she said, "is that accurate?" The room stilled, not dramatically, but in that subtle office way where even people who pretend not to care suddenly tune in. I should have been nervous, but I wasn't. Not this time. "No," I said evenly. "All scenarios were completed on Wednesday. The file is named Investor Sensitivity, Shach before Final. You and Mark were both tagged. The timestamp is 6:14 p.m. A flicker crossed her face. Acknowledgement, not surprise. She already knew. She just wanted it said aloud. Mark let out a short laugh. "Right, that file. I mean, yeah, it's there, but I thought we agreed it wasn't polished yet." "We didn't agree on that," I replied calmly. "And the output is correct. You can scroll down." He hesitated, then clicked. The table filled the screen. Clean, formatted, labeled. Every assumption footnoted. Every link traceable. "Investors expect precision," Claire said quietly. "We cannot misrepresent readiness." Something in the room shifted. A subtle realignment. People weren't looking at the slide anymore. They were looking at him. But he wasn't done fighting. He moved to the next slide, the risk distribution chart. This one also built by me. "So this section," he said, clearing his throat, "was still a draft. We didn't finalize the weighting because you changed the labels after I completed it," I said, "and your changes broke the formula references. That's why the draft looked wrong." The color drained from his face before he could stop it. This time Claire didn't look at me. She looked at him. "Is that true?" she asked. He swallowed. "Maybe I adjusted the labels, yeah, but nothing," she said. "If you modify someone's work, you own the modification. That's basic version control." He didn't answer. Silence spread through the room. Not the passive kind from earlier meetings. This one had an edge, like everyone suddenly realized the floor wasn't as stable as they thought. I continued, but not to score points, just to finish the work. "All risk weightings, dependencies, and constraints are documented in the technical appendix," I said. "Pages 9 through 14. The audit trail is in the shared folder." For a moment, no one spoke. Even the HVAC seemed quieter. Then James from IT, who rarely engaged in anything, shifted forward in his seat. Sorry," he said carefully, "but if all that is documented, why were we told the scenarios weren't done?" He didn't sound accusatory, just confused, but that was enough. Mark's hands twitched on the clicker. "Because I wasn't aware he'd finalized everything," he said. "We've had some miscommunication," Claire cut in. "You were aware. You were tagged. You acknowledged the update." He opened his mouth to argue and then closed it again. The room exhaled. lightly, imperceptibly, but I felt it. Something had broken, and it wasn't me. We continued through the deck, slide by slide. Each time Mark tried to pivot or embellish, Claire asked for specifics, dates, sources, files. Each time I provided them. Calm, precise, neutral. He stopped trying by slide 23. By slide 27, he wasn't presenting anymore. He was surviving. When we finally hit the last slide, Claire closed her laptop. "Let's take 10, she said, "then regroup for next steps." Everyone stood, stretching, gathering notebooks, but no one left immediately. People lingered, that instinctive office behavior when they know something real just happened. Mark stepped outside first, giving his tie a small, frustrated yank. Claire approached me quietly. "Good work," she said. "Your preparation shows." I nodded. "Thanks." "And Grant," she added, lowering her voice, "don't go anywhere after the break. I need to discuss the next phase with you." Her tone wasn't ominous. It was decisive. When the room emptied, I sat back down, feeling the heat finally leave my hands. The confrontation wasn't explosive. No shouting, no theatrics. Just facts, and the weight of them landing where they belonged. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. And Monday's real presentation was still ahead, which meant one thing. This wasn't the end of the chaos. It was only the moment it stopped being mine. The Monday investor meeting didn't explode. It unraveled. Quietly, cleanly, the way real consequences usually do. The investors joined via video, the kind of people who speak in measured sentences and don't blink unless they mean to. Mark tried to reclaim ground early, jumping into the introduction with forced confidence, but the damage from Friday was still hanging in the air. Claire watched him the way a surgeon watches a wound before deciding whether it needs stitches or removal. When it was my turn, I walked through the numbers without flourish, just facts, logic, traceability. Every question from the investors linked to a spreadsheet, a footnote, an assumption they could verify themselves. Nothing performative, just competence. And then it happened. One of the investors, a woman named Brennan, sharp, meticulous, the kind who reads everything twice, asked, "Who constructed the sensitivity models? They're unusually clear." Before I could answer, Mark opened his mouth, and Claire beat him to it. "Grant handled all of the modeling," she said. "He's been leading the technical strategy of this project." The phrasing was intentional, not helping, not supporting, leading. Mark froze, just for a second, but enough. For the remainder of the call, the investors directed every technical question to me. Mark faded into the background. Not humiliated, not attacked, just irrelevant. The worst punishment someone like him can receive. When the meeting ended, Brennan gave a small nod. "Good work. I appreciate precision." The call disconnected. Silence returned. Claire closed her laptop and looked at Mark first. "Stay here." 2 words. Flat. Final. She turned to me next. "Oh, Grant, conference room 2 in 10 minutes. I want to discuss the next project with you." Not with you and Mark. Not with the team. With me. I stepped out. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. 10 minutes later, Claire walked in holding a printed document. I recognized it immediately. HR's performance documentation template, the kind managers use only when something has shifted past conversation and into process. "Before we start," she said, sitting across from me, "I want to be clear. Your work in the last 2 weeks has changed the way the leadership team sees the department. I'm recommending you for lead analyst on the next cycle." It wasn't a promotion yet, but it was the thing that actually mattered. Visibility backed by results. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. She nodded once. "As for Mark, there will be steps, formal ones. I can't discuss details yet, but the review started today." I didn't ask for more. I didn't need to know. People who chase credit rarely survive environments that run on facts. By Wednesday, the shifts were visible. Mark wasn't leading meetings anymore. He wasn't sending recaps that rewrote reality. He wasn't hovering near Claire's desk with his practiced grin. Instead, he spent most of his time in closed-door conversations. HR, Claire, operations, the trifecta that no one ever wants to meet with in the same week. He avoided my eyes completely, not out of guilt, out of recognition. He finally realized the story he had built around me had cracked beyond repair. On Friday afternoon, I got the email, a short message from Claire. Your offer letter for lead analyst is ready for sign-off. Can you stop by? I sat back in my chair, letting it settle. Not excitement, not triumph. Just alignment. The feeling of finally being in a place where your work matches your role. When I stood to head to her office, Mark's voice drifted over from the far corner. He was speaking low, but the desperation was unmistakable. No, I can fix this, he said into the phone. It's just a misunderstanding. They're overreacting. His words, once so loud, now barely carried. I kept walking. 2 weeks later, I had already transitioned into my new role when I received a message from a former teammate. Did you hear? Mark's gone. A screenshot followed, an internal memo, performance issues, failure to meet documentation standards, misrepresentation of deliverables, corporate language for something much simpler. He had been relying on shadows, and we'd turned on the lights. I stared at the memo for a moment, then closed the screen. No rush of victory. No satisfaction in watching someone fall. Just calm. Because the truth was, I never wanted revenge. I wanted my work to stop disappearing behind someone else's ego. I wanted to stop being the person who kept everything running while someone louder took the credit. And that had already happened. I had stepped out of the role he built for me, the quiet worker in the background. I had stopped carrying someone else's weight, stopped absorbing someone else's narrative, stopped letting myself be easy to erase. In the end, the consequences weren't mine to deliver. They were his to face. I left the office early that day. The air outside felt clearer than it had in months. Mark had spent years defining me, but he'd forgotten one thing. A story only holds power if everyone keeps pretending it's true. And I had stopped pretending.